We don't need a quorum for a workshop.
Well,
I think so. It's already
I cannot talk to you.
close to 4:10.
Notice of a public meeting of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville. Pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5 of the Texas Government Code, the Texas Opens Meetings Act, notice is hereby given that the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, in accordance with Article 5, Section 12 of the Charter of said city, will convene a workshop on Tuesday, May the 29th, 2012, at 4 p.m. in the Commission Chambers on the second floor of the Brownsville City Hall, located at 1001 East Elizabeth Street, Brownsville, Cameron County, Texas. Workshop item, discussion regarding city budget.
Okay, is this thing on? Can you guys hear it? Wanted to thank everybody for being here. Unfortunately, I wasn't here the previous meeting, and I understand that we had a report that was done in executive session with regards to the procedures of the purchasing departments. Without going into any privileged information or conversations, I did receive some more information with regarding to that meeting, but I'm not sure, and I will defer to Pete. Was there any further discussion that was supposed to be done with regards to the purchasing?
I know that the item was, there was a workshop that was done by Mr. Robert, but I don't know what the outcome was.
The only comment was made by Commissioner Zamora at the end, and she was one of the people that had asked for the item, and she seemed pleased with the comments that she made. I'll ask legal also. She seemed pleased with what was presented to her. So okay. Other than that,
and Robert, you're here. I do have a couple of questions. If and you can sit. That's okay. You can be right there, just at that table right there. Now, the items that I received information with regard to were specific instances with regards to various vendors on various contracts. Were you requested those items specifically by a member of the commission, or were those items, how did you determine which items were to be discussed? That's the only question I have.
Well, that was discussed at the executive session. I was not part of the executive session. No,
I understand what's discussed at executive. What I'm saying was you prepared all the information to give to the general manager, right?
I believe that Jeff Johnson was the individual who compiled that information and responded to those specific questions.
What I'm saying is, how did they target those particular vendors and those particular transactions, if you know?
I do not know.
And you don't either?
No.
Okay.
The specific vendors were an executive, and over here was just an overall.
Okay.
And see, Jeff Johnson has all the documentation.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have. Okay. Now, Pete, I think this item now, this will be a short meeting, I'm assuming, but with regards to the city budget, we talked about in previous meetings with regards to the different departments. And I understand that the evaluations have not been completed. There are some that are in draft stages. I think Stephanie prepared some that are coming forth. Do you have any evaluations of any of the departments at this time?
At this time, no.
Okay. Let me tell you where we were headed in that regard, and for the notion of the people in the public sector to know what we were doing, and perhaps maybe we can have a little bit better direction. My whole idea of trying to look at your budget was, the first thing is, can we now protract that long process of going all the way from this time of the year and finish it before, let's say, June or July at the end? In other words, that was the first thing that I wanted to do, as opposed to going all the way through the whole summer and not getting anything done until September. And I realize I have a lot of the notice factors and the legal factors, and I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about trying to let the commission know exactly what the budget would be, let's say, even if we were to take a summer break, which I'm not saying that we are or we aren't, but it would be nice to have that already done before we do that.
We're scheduled to have the first workshop during the first meeting of August. that we'll talk to you about what has been turned in and from the departments, and also what revenue funding sources that we will have to cover those expenditures. And that will be our first meeting, but our first meeting is scheduled for August, the first meeting in August.
Okay. Here's what I would like to attempt to do, is that I'd like the City Commission to be fully apprised of what action you intend to bring on the August meeting, okay? In other words, so they don't come to the meeting and hear it for the first time. They'll have a chance. And so if you could set a date by which you say, you know, the end of June, what the proposal that you think, or a draft of the proposal that you think will come forth to the commission, that way the commission has plenty of time to take a look at it, make any suggestions, additions, or deletions that they think is appropriate to send back to you, and you'll have plenty of time to take a look at it and maybe keep going with the communication or conversation for a period of time, and so that we can kind of hopefully come to close to an agreement by that first workshop, okay?
I didn't bring the calendar of events, but I believe when we meet with the departments, it's not until early part of July. That's when we meet with the departments to go over their budgets. We give them about 30 days to prepare their budgets to submit it to us.
But all those have already been sent out to all the departments, if I understood correctly the last time. So 30 days from that would be the middle of June.
Right, and then we need to gather all this information ourselves, recalculate, make sure that everything that has been submitted to us is correct, gather all the departments, put everything together. We can certainly have a workshop early, but Mayor, I don't have a problem having a workshop early. Here's
what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do two things. I'm trying to expedite the process, and I'm trying to simplify the process. In other words, I went through the process last year, and without, you know, articulating as to each one of the steps, but it seemed to me a little bit more sophisticated than a simple negotiations, but there was no specifics as to say, you know, hey, the reason that I want X amount of dollars is because I have to have X amount of staff, and, you know, and versus what I had the year before. And that happened, I think, in one department, but I didn't see that uniformly throughout the whole process. And what I'm trying to get is so that each one of the commissioners says, you know, okay, I gave you $100, and I know what I got for that $100, and this year you want $150. Well, what are you going to propose to do with that $150? And did you complete whatever you asked to do with that out of the first 100? I think that's the appropriate, I mean, that's the way most businesses are run. Mm-hmm. And so that would be the evaluation and the evaluation of the dollars and cents that are being spent of taxpayer money, okay? So that's what I'm trying to do, is because if you organize it in that fashion, I don't think the procedure takes quite as long as you guys have it set up for right now. And I may be wrong.
Well, keep in mind, Mayor, that the number one revenue source that the city has is property taxes.
Sure.
We won't know what those numbers are. We get the certified tax roll in late July by the chief appraisal. And obviously from there, we have about 2 weeks to figure out what our tax rate is, to find out what our valuations are. And that's a key number, the property taxes. But we can certainly have an estimated amount in June.
Sure.
As long as we understand that those numbers are going to be changing back and forth. Normally, obviously, the reason why we expand all the way to September is because we got to have a window of public hearings in case the City Commission decides to increase the tax rate above the effective tax rate. If we don't have this, and we've gone through these steps before, if we don't have those meetings, those public meetings, come September, or let's say we approve the budget in August, it's difficult for us to set a tax rate unless we have all this in place.
And
and the other is looking at what's coming up in 2013. We do have contracts, 2 contracts, one with the fire and one with police, and that's going to take over $1 million just to settle those 2 contracts, of 1.1 million if I'm correct, that we're going to need extra money to pay those contracts. Now, this year we expect to generate $800,000 in sales tax. That's all we expect to generate more than last year. We still need to, all the budget that obviously, when we prepare a budget, we want to make sure we have the revenue sources to take care of those expenditures. And like every year, when we come and talk to you, the City Commission, we always come up with reductions to reduce the budgets, because we, by law, must present a balanced budget to you. So all of this can be done by June, Mayor, with the understanding that there are some numbers that are going to be part of it, of the equation.
Okay, and that's what I'd like to kind of aim for. Okay, I'm not saying, you know, I realize that the secure numbers, and I'm fully aware of all the public hearings and all the legal ramifications of doing that. I'm just saying that I think it's a good time to take a look at the process, see if we can expedite it and clarify it just a bit. And again, I'm doing this because I did go through your process last year, and I'm not being critical of it. I'm just saying I think there's room for improvement, and it allows this City Commission, who is very capable of looking at all these numbers and looking at it for themselves and trying to assist the administration in getting this done as quickly as possible. Okay?
Fine.
Mr. Commissioner, did you have?
I would rather choose not to say anything.
Okay. All right. Commissioner?
No, I don't have any anything to add to what the mayor
Okay.
just said.
Anyway, let's aim for that, Charlie and Pete, in order so that we can, again, I think there's a lot of issues with regards to some of the equipment that some of these directors have been requesting for some period of time. We haven't had the funds to do it. Now let's figure out whether we can embark on a plan, perhaps maybe not immediately, but start taking care of the short-term needs and also the long-term needs, so that there won't be any excuses of why we can't conduct all of our business the way it should be conducted. Okay? That's about it. Do we have anybody else that was going to report on the city budget, Charlie?
No, sir. We're in the planning stage of doing, of course, you got drafts, organizational charts, and things like that, but that'll be hand in hand with the budget and for you all review.
Okay.
Well, one thing that I'd like to mention to you, Mayor and Commissioners, is that when we approved the budget for 2012, there were some departments, most of the departments were actually cut back. And that was the reason why we cut back expenditures, was in order to balance the budget. You need to have a balanced budget. We are coming to you next Tuesday with budget amendments. And we're looking at overtime expenses for police and fire. Those are expenses that were obviously through budget cuts, and we're looking at the year so far. They're not going to be able to make it. So we're looking at $1 million in budget amendments that include mostly the fire and police, the overtime, and we also had, at the beginning of the year, we had problems because of the fuel costs. They were high. Yeah, now they're slowly coming down, so hopefully that amount is going to be less than that. But we also have to keep in mind that when the audit was approved, or it came to you a few weeks ago, and you look at the numbers for the audit of 2011, we see that our fund balance decreased by $800,000, $880,000, which brought us to about a 12.5% reserves. We have a policy, a fund balance policy, that says we need to keep 15% in reserves. It also says that you have 1 year, that period. Now we can change this policy. We have a year to gain to bring it back to the 15%. Now, what does that take in as numbers? Well, the number is 2.4 million. 2.4 million that we must make up today in order to bring us to the 15% at the end of September. Now, we can certainly lower these numbers, but this is the policy that was adopted by the City Commission in November of 2011. We can, and we went to this, when we had a rating this year on our bonds, and one of the things that they ask, what is your policy? What is your fund balance policy? Well, we did tell them that our policy is 15%. We ended the year with 12.5%, not 15%. So that's something that we need to look at. We want to definitely have all the projects that we can think of. They're all good projects, but we also must have the funding sources. And the major two funding sources that we have right now is property tax and sales tax. Sales tax is very difficult to predict. Right now, our projections is that we're going to have a $300,000 more than what's in the budget. If you look at it, we're looking at about $800,000 more than in 2011. Is the economy going to improve in 2013 to see a huge increase in our sales tax? Traditionally, we have been very conservative in our projections, not only in revenues but in expenses. And we have never exceeded the budget either on the expense side or on the revenue side. And that's one of the reasons why we have been able to maintain what we have. We're talking about a fund balance that's strong. And that's something that has definitely helped the city with strong fund balances because our ratings, our bond ratings, have increased. For Moody's, they've gone up 4 times. And that's good when we go to market and borrow money because we borrow at a lower interest rate. And that's something that we all need to understand, that we have all these projects that are coming up. We always must tell you where the funding is coming from. And hopefully that's what we're going to be doing with you when we present the budget to you.
Let me give you maybe an idea that I don't know whether it's worked from an accounting standpoint, but because of the fluctuations of the sales tax, which, you know, from all projections are going to continue to rise to a certain degree. And I don't know whether this is feasible or not, but if you could tie your reserves to the amount of sales tax that you collect over and above, in other words, if it's a 15% and you can project to us that you can reach that 15% within, let's say, a couple of years or 3 years based upon a projected, and if you don't meet it, then we can kind of lower our expectations. But it would seem to me that there's some sort of plausible ability to sit there and say, if I make X amount of dollars over and above what I projected, then I can put that in the reserves, and then our reserves go up a certain percentage in accordance with the overage.
Yeah, that's very true, Mayor, and we need to obviously reduce expenses in some cases. Again, it's going to take $1.1 million to satisfy the 3% increase for the fire and police coming up in 2013. It's not in the budget yet. It's already there when we start working on it. So we start right now, to start the year of $1 million more in expenses that we didn't have in 2012. Obviously, we're going to have to figure out where we're going to get those revenues. More than likely, it'll be the sales tax. Property tax, probably be the same unless the City Commission increases the tax rate, which we did last year, or other revenue sources that we can come up with. I know that we have had a strong year. That's going to help. On the bridge crossings, we estimate we're going to have about $500,000 more this fiscal year than we had last year. That's a big plus, because we're going to have $800,000 in sales tax, plus another $500,000 in bridge traffic. Now, again, the bridge, is it going to be as good as 2012, 2013 as it was in 2012? It's a guessing game. All of this is a guessing game. For sure, we always know where we're going to get on our property tax, because the property tax is already set, and the majority of our taxpayers pay their property taxes. We have a good record of that. So that's a given. Property tax are very sure. We have the municipal court fines, some kind, sometimes, yeah, yes, no. It's another major revenue source. We have landfill fees that can go either way. These are some of the major revenue sources that the city has that we have been able to, in the last few years, done a great job as far as I'm concerned, as far as budgets are concerned. Because we've been able to if you look at our estimated fund balances, we all exceed the amount. But it's, to me, again, the sales tax it's difficult to predict, very difficult. And hopefully we'll have $1 million more last year. But remember, we're starting the year with $1.1 million just to take care of the contracts for police and fire, just to start the year.
At the same time, we're also working with departments, for example, police department, in restructuring some of their activities, how they do things, 410 plan. So we're going to see that we're going to probably reduce overtime and the overtime expenditure in the next fiscal year. We started some of it already. However, we're midway through the fiscal year, but we see some promising numbers there that we haven't confirmed, but we're working with staff. Subsidy to the airport, for example, will be lowered because we have been successful in leasing some spaces with the possibility of selling some of the spaces we have there, things like that. Taking over the Levi's building, and rerouting all our storage activity there, things like that. So we are working on the possibilities of reducing some of the fees by just restructuring how we operate.
Well, I think everybody's working towards the same goal. So I'm not. What I'm saying to most everybody is that we need to kind of get a grip on some of these things and do it as quickly as we can, so that we don't have to wait till the last minute to make decisions which may or may not be in the city's favor. So if we can, I think all points are well taken, and all those will be taken into consideration. I think this commission is fully aware of all the economic ups and downs. I suspect that we're on an upswing, but then again, I'm the eternal optimist, right?
And keep in mind, Mayor, we still have not reached the 2008 sales tax numbers. We're probably a year or two away from reaching the high number in sales tax that we got in 2008.
Okay.
And those are facts. Those are numbers that on the record.
Sure.
That's a positive note that we're going to get there. That's good.
We'll be fine. We'll be fine. I think everybody's doing their due diligence and working hard to get to where we need to go. Does any director have anything else that needs to be added as far as the budget process? Commissioners, anything else?
We have another item that we all need to know. Realizing that there is a bill in Congress, Department of Transportation. Norma, you want to speak about it? Regarding the operations, funding for operations by the Department of Transportation. We have apparently exceeded the 200,000 population, the city and the urbanized areas. Right now, hopefully there's a bill in Congress that will be approved whereby we will be able to use some of these monies for operations. Right now, we have monies to carry us through 2013. We generate right now from the feds for operations for our bus systems about $1,800,000. $1,800,000 that the city right now gets from the feds for operations. Let's say, for one reason or the other, that this bill, we're hoping that this bill is approved whereby we are going to be authorized to use some of these monies for operations. But let's keep in mind and say, maybe it doesn't. We need to start planning to find out where we're going to get the additional 1.8 million, or maybe less, because now we'll be able to use certain funds that we normally are not up to, right now. There's some funds which is the maintenance. What is it?
Okay, right. Well, there's a few things that are going on right now as far as it relates to the transportation bill.
Can
you want to get closer? Get closer. Get closer, please.
There's a few things right now that relate to transit, and there's a lot of that going on right now as finding ways to be able to continue to fund transit with everything going up. One of the things is that they're looking at helping us capitalize fuel. They've allowed us to capitalize preventative maintenance, and when we talk about preventative maintenance, we're trying to carry that over to not only include vehicle maintenance, but include facility maintenance, bus stop maintenance, even our crew, trying to get them charged at an 80-20 to the grants. Other things that might come available to us would be job access, reverse commute. Money will now be coming to the city of Brownsville, the MPO, and we might be able to apply to that directly. Right now, we're in a competitive process with other small urban systems, but once we exceed the 200,000 population, that money will now become available to us to be able to utilize for JARC. The thing is that when we're using federal funds, we have to justify everything. We have to, be able, a percentage of our ridership has to be, what percentage of our ridership is using it to go to work, and we have to do the paperwork to justify that. So that's monies that will become available that might help us in our operating funds. But Pete is correct. If for whatever reason the transportation bill does not, we are right now, the language did get put in the bill, and we are allowed to use, we will be allowed to use 50% of our operating funds, which what that will do, it will keep us at the same level where we are at status quo. We won't be able to increase the service, but we won't be able to, we will be able to maintain it. Now, if they do decide that, for whatever reason, that language gets pulled out, then we've got all these other resources we're going to have to try to tap into, but it's very difficult to plan because it's from year to year that we're going to have to be applying for these monies. But for right now, we are funded through 2013 because we've been able to utilize. We have 3 years to spend our 5307 money, and we're just utilizing our 5311 year money in in fiscal year 12. So the fiscal year money, we're coming before you Tuesday to approve the 5307 funds for fiscal year 12, which will help us fund fiscal year 13 for us. So those are...
Yeah, 2014 may be a problem.
Yes, 2014 that's when we'll start. But some of the things that we're doing now to address that is we're going back and we're reassessing all our bus stops as a way to see if we can reduce some of the bus stops and finding ways to become more efficient and effective in the way that we're providing the service. So right now we've identified, we want to go back and see if we could cut at least 15% on bus stops, and that'll prevent, that'll realize some cost savings on the time that it takes to complete a route and how many stops that bus makes. So it'll realize the savings to us, but until we get it all done, we won't know what that what the final savings will be. But we're starting to do things to address what we're anticipating might happen in 2014.
Leasing revenues of the new buses.
Yes, and the lease revenue that we're generating from the BMT from all the operator tenants, they're helping pay for the also the O&M on the department, so that reduces also the city's contribution to the department.
Norma, how much money, let's assume, and you may not have a number right now, but let's assume that this bill gets killed in Congress, doesn't get approved, and because of the budget constraints that they're having, we are having. Do you have I realize that you're using other funding sources. Do you have a number as to how much local general fund would have to be put up in 2014? Assuming that this bill gets killed.
It would be approximately 1.8.
Still? Okay.
Yeah, unless we're able to reduce the service, to reduce service and find
So
other
the
ways.
rentals will help, but it will definitely.
Yes,
At least it's help,
right,
but not to the extent, because we're talking about millions here. We're talking about 1.8 million. Also, we also need to, we want to put money in reserve for future expenses, like some of us know that went against us recently. Chances we win, chances we lose. So that means that during the budget process, from day one, we would like to put a certain amount of reserve to take care of this possible payout that may be coming up in 2013, 2014, which is huge. And that's something we need to look at. If not, obviously we're going to find some financial problems as we move forward. So those are things that we already know. They may be here or may not be here. And that's what we need to look at also.
One of the first things that I looked at when the census came out was that we were under 200,000, because you and I went to Washington on that. And the census told me that we were under 200,000, so why is it now that we're coming back with this?
The city of Brownsville is under 200,000, but the urbanized area, the census counts the urbanized area, even though we might not serve the urbanized area, the entire urbanized area, we are funded based on that urbanized area, because technically we should be servicing the entire urbanized area. But what happened in the 2010 census was that the urbanized, and these are some of the challenges we're faced, the urbanized area grew, the rural service decreased, yet the funding for rurals went up while their service area decreased, and the funding for small urbans decreased and our service area increased. And so those are some of the challenges that we're having to address. It's not based just on the city of Brownsville's population. It is the urbanized area as identified by the census.
McAllen's on the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the middle of all these cities, and I think their fleet is only 7
It's
buses?
only 8 buses,
8 buses.
and they've exceeded, I mean, but they're counting the whole, all the Edinburgh mission,
We got money from them.
yeah. And the reason that we were able to obtain the money from them was because they weren't able to utilize it for operating. So instead of returning it back to the government, I mean, back to the feds, they were able to de-obligate that amount and give it to us for capital because they can't spend it on operating. And it was money that we were able to utilize for the multimodal terminal. And the same thing with Harlingen. They also exceeded their operating, they also have capital dollars as well that they weren't able to spend, and they were able to de-obligate them and send them to us rather than sending them back.
We also had notes, Laredo has a transit tax. So they don't use any general fund money for their bus operations. They get it through a transit tax. Way back in the late 80s, city tried to pass a transit tax, but it was defeated by the voters. So right now we are using general fund monies.
Can you do the research on that for us? Is your department able to do that kind of research?
We've had that information, and we just have to dig it out again because we've done it. We've pulled it out because we were trying to do it again. But the thing is that we're capped. So in order for us to be able to now pass a transit tax, we need to go to the state legislature and allow them to give us an option to exceed the sales cap by whatever percentage we want for tax, and then we have to take it to the local election. I mean, people to vote on it to see if they want to do that and tax themselves.
Well, I don't want to go tax anybody right now, but I definitely would like to go look at it.
Right.
And have it as an option for when the time does start arriving, that we can explore something. And like we discussed last time, nobody's for a tax increase. Right. But if you present it the correct way, if you tell people what this is going to service, you know, public service is very important. I mean, public transportation is very important to Brownsville. Mm-hmm. So we need to be at some point responsible. At one time, we're going to have to become responsible for it. And if we are going to have to become responsible for it, and just at some point tax, I would like to be prepared and be able to tell the people, this is why. It's not because we want to. It's in order to sustain ourselves. This is why, and I believe that when it's presented correctly, it can happen.
Right, and that is, but in our case, we still need to let the state legislature allow us to do it locally so that we can do that. And we have been trying, actually for the past 5 years, to go and get that at the state level, but we haven't been successful. But it's something that we will continue to do now, you know, at the state level,
Sure.
as much as we're doing at the federal level.
Okay. Thank you, Norma. Appreciate it. Unless we have anything further, I urge everybody who hasn't to please go vote for the candidate of your choice. Voting is important. It's your voice in government. If you know of anybody in your families or friends of your families that haven't voted, please do so. It's important as a community to show the people of the state of Texas as well as the United States of America that the people in Brownsville do vote. So I urge everybody to do that.
Mayor, if you don't mind, just to let directors know and anybody that might be watching that tomorrow at the Southmost Library we will be having the hurricane preparedness event.
Correct.
So, with that.
Anyway, unless we have something else, I think we will adjourn. Thank you very much.